Bantam Doubleday Dell Audio Publishing presents Star Wars, The Paradise Snare, Book 1 of the Han Solo Trilogy, by A.C. Crispin. The ancient Shroop-ship, a relic of the Clone Wars, hung in orbit over the planet Corellia, silent and seemingly derelict. Looks were deceiving, however. The old Liberator-class vessel, once called Guardian of the Republic, now had a new life as Trader's Luck. The interior had been gutted and refitted with a motley assortment of living environments, and now contained nearly 100 sentient beings, many of them humanoid. At the moment, only a few of them were awake, since it was the middle of the sleep cycle. Garrus Shrike, leader of the loosely allied trading clan that lived aboard the Luck, was not a man to cross without a good reason and a fully charged blaster. A slender man of medium height, Garrus was handsome in a hard-edged way. Streaks of silver white above his temples accentuated his black hair and ice-blue eyes. His mouth was thin-lipped. He seldom smiled, and never with good humor. At the moment, Shrike was sitting around the table in the former wardroom of the enlisted officers, playing sabak and drinking tankards of potent Alderaanian ale. One of his fellow players, Brafid, a hulking Eloman with two bulbous eyes protruding from the sides of his head, suddenly glanced behind him. Brafid grunted. "Something funny about the lockout sensor on the weapons cache, Captain. It's reading normal now, but something flickered as though the lock shorted out for a second. Probably just a momentary power flux." The captain rose and walked around the table to study the readouts himself. "Somebody shorted out the lock and is running a sim to fool us into thinking it's just a power flux. We've got a thief aboard." He turned to a tall, heavy-set human. "Lared, activate the biosensor. See if you can ID the thief and where he's heading." Lared, Shrike's brother, nodded and bent over the auxiliary control board. "Corellian human," he announced after a moment. "Male. Height, 1.8 meters. Dark hair and eyes. The bioscanner says it recognizes him. He's heading aft, toward the galley." Shrike's expression hardened until his eyes were as cold and blue as the glaciers on Hoth. The Solo kid. He's the only one cocky enough to try something like this. Han Solo gripped the stolen blaster as he tiptoed along the narrow metal corridor. When he'd wired into the sim and jimmied the lock into the weapons cache, he'd only had a moment to grab the first weapon that came to hand. Nervously, he pushed strands of hair back from his forehead. The blaster felt heavy and awkward in his hand. Han had seldom held one before, and he'd never actually fired a weapon. He crept up to the door of the galley and hesitated. He heard the soft clatter of metal pans, then the sploosh of dough being kneaded. Sticking the blaster into his belt, he opened the door and stepped into the galley. "Hey, Dulana. It's me. I've come to say goodbye." The Wookiee who had been vigorously kneading the wastrel dough swung around to face him. Dulana's real name was Dulana Mapia, and she had been Han's closest friend since she'd come to live aboard Trader's Luck nearly 10 years ago, when he had been about 9. Shrike had found Han when he was 5 years old, homeless and begging in an alley, and put him to work with the other charges aboard the Luck. Each child aboard Trader's Luck was given an elementary-level education so he, she, or it could learn to count money. Beyond that, Shrike discouraged the children from pursuing higher learning. Partly because he wanted to flout Shrike's wishes, and partly due to Dulana's encouragement, Han had kept up his studies in secret. Once Dulana discovered what he was doing, she monitored his curriculum, making him study subjects he would have otherwise skipped. Reluctantly, Han tackled reading, math, the physical sciences, and history. Han couldn't speak Wookiee, but he understood it very well. For her part, Dulana couldn't speak Basic, but she understood it as well as she did her own language. So communication between the human youth and the elderly Wookiee widow was fluent, but different. Han nodded. Yes, tonight's the night. I'm getting off Trader's Luck, and I'm never coming back. Even as Dulana rumbled at him worriedly, she automatically resumed kneading her dough. Han gave her a lopsided grin. You worry too much, Dulana. Of course I've got it all planned. I'm heading for Yalisha. There's a robot freighter headed there. It's a religious colony near Hut Space, and they offer pilgrims sanctuary. I'll be safe from Shrike there, and... He held up a small holodisc. Look at this! They're advertising for a pilot! Impulsively, the Corellian youth threw himself against her warm, solid bulk, hugging her fiercely. I'm gonna miss you, too. You take care of yourself, Dulana. Well, ain't this a touching sight? Said a cold, all-too-familiar voice. Han and Dulana wheeled to face the man who'd entered. Garrus Shrike lounged in the doorway. Laird Shrike and Brafid the Ealaman were visible over Shrike's shoulder. Han licked dry lips. Listen, Captain, I can explain. Shrike drew himself up, his eyes narrowing. You can explain what, you cowardly little traitor? Stealing from your family, stabbing your benefactor in the back? But I've had it with you, Solo. I've been lenient with you so far because you're a blasted good swoop pilot and all that prize money came in handy, but my patience is at an end. Han gulped with terror as Shrike started toward him. He'd lashed out at the traitor captain once before, 2 years ago, when he'd been feeling cocky after winning the gladiatorial free-for-all on Jubilar, and had been instantly sorry. With a snarl, Dulana stepped forward. Shrike's hand dropped to his blaster. You stay out of this, old Wookiee. Your cooking isn't that good. Han had already grabbed his friend's furry arm and was forcibly holding her back. Dulana, no! She shook off Han's hold as easily as she would have waved off an annoying insect and continued heading toward Shrike. The captain drew his blaster. Han leapt forward. No! His foot lashed out in an old street-fighting technique. His instep impacted solidly with Shrike's breastbone. The captain's breath went out in a great whoof, and he went over backward. Han hit the deck and rolled. A tingler bolt sizzled past his ear. As Dulana started toward him, the captain wheezed, Laird! Shrike's brother drew his blaster and pointed it at the Wookiee. Stop, Dulana! His words had no more effect than Han's. Dulana was in full Wookiee battle rage. She grabbed Laird's wrist and yanked, spinning him around and snapping him in a terrible parody of a child's snap-the-whip game. Han heard a crunch as tendons and ligaments gave way. Laird Shrike shrieked. Grabbing the blaster from his belt, Han snapped off a shot at the Ealaman who was leaping forward. Tingler aimed at Dulana's midsection. Brafid howled in agony and dropped to the floor. Shrike staggered to his feet, blaster aimed squarely at Han's head. Stop it, Dulana, or your buddy Solo dies. Han dropped his blaster and put his hands up in a gesture of surrender. Dulana stopped in her tracks, growling softly. Then she shoved Han aside and leapt for Shrike. The blaster's energy beam caught her full in the chest and she went down. Dulana! Han yelled in anguish. With a quickness he hadn't known he possessed, he dived at Shrike, hitting the captain in a driving tackle around his knees. Shrike went over backward again, and this time his head impacted solidly with the deck. He sagged, out cold. Han crawled back to his friend, turning her over gently, seeing the great hole the blaster beam had bored into her chest. He knew immediately that the wound was mortal. Han clutched her. No, I won't leave you. Tears blurred his vision. I don't care if I get away. Yeah, I'm sure you'll be safe. One with the life power. Han tried to sound sincere. He knew that some Wookiees believed in a unifying power that bound all of existence together. He'd never been able to translate the term accurately. The Wookiee word could have meant strength or force. Personally, he thought it was just superstition. Finally, Han gave way to her pleas. I promise. I'll go now, and I swear I'll always remember you, Dulana. He laid her gently on the deck, then rose and picked up the blaster. His running feet resounded through the corridors of Trader's Luck.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?